Hello everyone, and welcome back to part 3 of my Frankenstein monster puppet build. In the last video, I finished making the body or the head of the puppet and added some brain matter. What I did since then was I added extra brain matter just to make him a bit more full in the cranium because I wanted to see more of the brain matter. In order to do that, I did put in a little bit of a piece of foam here so that the brain matter wouldn't fall through to the where the mouth is. So that's what I kind of did there. I'm liking it much better, and I was now ready to continue with my puppet build. We're going to start with his hair. I was really fortunate to find this black fur fabric locally for a really good price. I was really excited about that. And I will be using the template that we made in the last video for his cranium as the base for what I'm going to cut out of the fur. Might as well do that. It's the same shape, and it will make things a little bit easier. So what I want to do is I want him to have bangs, almost like a bowl cut, that the hair will fall in front of his face. And so in order to do that, I have to make sure that I position the template that the bottom, that curved edge there, will have the fur going in that particular direction, so it'll fall in front of his face. So that's what I am doing right here, and I'm using my chalk pen. Now, you have to make sure that you don't flip it that way when you're making your second copy, because if you do that, then the other half of his hairline will be going in the other direction, and it'll be sticking up instead of down, and then it would be a very different look that I wasn't going for. So what you need to do is, when you're ready to do your second piece, you will make it so that the rounded edge is also in the same position where the fur will fall downwards. So that's what I'm doing right there. I'm positioning it in that direction. Just like that. So now that I've done that, it's time to cut the fur. Now, when it comes to cutting faux fur, you have to cut it from the back, and you want to cut just the binding fabric that's on the back end. You don't want to cut the fur itself, or then you're giving it a haircut. So you have to be very careful. You use a sharp knife and cut along there. So that's what I've done. There are my two pieces. And we're going to sew them together. Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Look at him! He's got a bowl cut! I love it! I really loved it. But I needed to shorten it a little bit because you couldn't see any of the brain matter. So there we go. I basically did like a ½ an inch all around every edge of the two pieces of the fur, which shortened it the way that I wanted to. So now I'm going to sew it. Now with fur, just like you have to be careful when you're cutting the fur, I always hand stitch my faux fur because I find that when I put it through the machine, the sewing machine, it bunches the fur up and makes these like bubbles, like trapped fur on the seam, and it doesn't look very good at all. So I always do, I hand stitch my fur seams. So here it is, all finished. I did my darts first, and then I did the main seam across it. And I made his little toupee. So we're going to put it on there. He's looking fancy. Look at that. All ready to go. So now I'm going to turn to, before I sew the fur, his hair, his toupee down, I want to deal with the stitches that is going to hold his cranium down. So using just plain black yarn, I'm creating the pattern of stitches. So it's decorative, but it actually will function also to hold the cranium in place over the brain matter. So here I'm trying to decide, do I want zigzags? Do I want to go one stitch and then do another line and do another line, that sort of thing, which is the way that I decided to do it. I didn't want the zigzag. So I am using one of those tools that poke holes. I don't remember the name of it. I call it the pokey thingy. And I poke a hole where I want my my yarn needle to go through. So I don't know if you've used yarn needles, but they're not pointy on the end. They're kind of dull. So that's why I had to create a hole for it to go through. This was a tough job. It was very difficult to get all the way around and get through all the foam and all that kind of stuff. It was a little bit of a frustration. It took longer than I thought it would. But in the end, it really turned out really well. But sometimes, like if I was poking the hole through and the needle wasn't going in the same direction, it had a lot of trouble finding its path through the foam and the fabric. So it did take a lot of time, but in the end, it really worked out. So there we go. I kept making sure that my cranium was still in the same position, that it wasn't shifting, because nothing is holding it in place. So like that, it's not pinned or anything like that. I tried to pin it, but it didn't work. But I had to make sure that whenever I moved the cranium, I put it back in the same position. But there you go. There's the first few stitches. And there it is all the way around. I tried to make all the stitches a little uneven, you know, so that it gave it some variety and the brain matter coming through the edges. So here is a shot of it up to now with his hair and the stitches all together. He's really, really taking shape and starting to build a personality, which is awesome. So I had to figure out, what do I want to do next? And I think I'm going to do ears and nose, because that normally gives some ratios on size. So to start with, I'm doing the ears. And I had so much trouble with the ears. I just was not liking it. So I started with just half moons. And I liked the size. Sorry, but I did not like the shape. I think it made him look more goofy than I wanted. Kind of like a monkey. And I was like, that's not what I want at all. So I thought about it and thought about it. And then I tried some other shapes, more like a heart-shaped ear. And as you can see, I'm still not really liking it. He still looks a little monkey-like. So, but I decided to move on to the nose. I kept those. And at first I made a little bit too big. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to make his nose a little bit smaller. So here I am making a bit smaller of a nose. And the trick here is to start carving it out so it doesn't have as many sharp edges, because you want it to be kind of round. It's hard to tell, but it's kind of like a raindrop shape of a teardrop, I guess, nose. And so I like that a lot better. I like the proportion much better. So that is what I've got. But I still didn't like those ears. So I slept on it, and I decided I'm going to make the ears more more against his head, so they don't stick out. They're kind of like slanted against his head. So I'm just carving just a corner of it, so then it wouldn't be flush with his with the curvature of his head. And that seemed to make me much happier. That's what I was going for. Less monkey, more human, I guess. Mind you, it's Frankenstein. Maybe they would have put monkey ears on him. But there we go. Those are his features up to now, with the ears and the nose. Look at that. He's really starting to look like a character. There we go. So the next step is to cover them with fabric. So I started here with the same color of fleece, the light green. And basically you kind of make your own little pattern around the nose. You make sure your nose is the front is touching the fabric. And then you kind of create a little circle so that it can go all the way around. And then when I finished, I realized, you know what? I have that dark green. So I'm going to change his nose color to be the dark green. So that's what I did. And I'm liking that. So the next step is to do a basting stitch all the way around, because what you're going to do is leave it loose, and then you put your piece of foam inside the circle like I am right now, and then you just kind of pull the threads, and it just kind of embraces the piece of foam. It encapsulates the piece of foam, and you've got a nice little shape of a nose right there. And then you kind of tie your basting threads together, and it secures the thread so it won't undo. And there you go. There's his nose. You keep the threads there because you're going to use those to sew the nose on. But look at that. Look at that. I love it. And now I do the same thing for the ears. With the same color. I decided to do the same color. So with the dark green. And there they are. 2 ears and a nose. So the next step is to sew them on. So like I said, I left the threads from the basting stitch right in place. So I just reuse that thread. You just go all the way around, securing your your features on. I ended up making his nose a little crooked, but I thought that it kind of went with his character. But keep that in mind when you're securing this. I should have put more pins into his nose, holding it in the position that I liked. But in the end, I really liked it. There he is. Look at that. So they're all sewn on. So I think I will be turning to his eyes. So I've prepped 2 of my eyeballs. Ooh. They're made of air foam. I have a mold that I created myself for different shapes eyes. So I'm gonna try this size of eye, If it doesn't work, then I'll prep a couple more that are smaller, but we'll see how this goes. My plan for him is to have a under eyelid, like he's sleepy, like he's got bags under his eyes. But then also, gonna give him, I cut up a couple pieces of the black hair and made them into eyebrows. So the plan is to put those on there as well. And then see what that looks like. So the first thing I need to do is I have to mark on the eyeballs themselves where the underlids are going to show up. And what you use is a math compass to mark your lines, because the idea is that you want them to match. You like symmetry. Puppets are all about symmetry. So what you do is you place your compass on a certain spot on your cutting board. So I use one of the little grid corners. And then I place my eyeball in a specific spot. And then I draw a line where I like the lid to be onto the eyeball. And then without moving the compass, I put the next eyeball right in the exact same place. So it'll match. So there we go. 2 matching eyes with the eyelids. It's hard to see because I use pencil. But now the next step is to take some of your fleece and find a nice flat, straight edge, and you're going to glue the fleece along that line that you just drew. So here is the glue that I'm using to glue the eyelids to the eyes. And you just glue it along the line that you drew with the compass. And you just make sure you have no wrinkles. I should talk about the eyes a little bit. I used air foam clay, but I also then painted it twice with white acrylic paint and then some Mod Podge. For these ones, I did matte finish Mod Podge, and that was how I completed them. While the glue was drying, I turned to his tongue, and I found these awesome little felt hearts at Valentine's Day, and they're the perfect size. There's 2 sizes, and there's these big ones and little ones. So I'm trying this out. I used a Sharpie and I created the lines on the tongue, and using that same glue, I placed it in the mouth. And it's simple, very, very simple, but it really adds a lot to your puppet having a tongue in there. Okay, so they're pretty much, I wouldn't tug on them too hard, but they are glued there, so I'm gonna cut them out. So here's what they look like on the other side. Like that. And now I'm putting them in place. I use pins around the eyes. They kind of anchor the eyes to where I want them to be, just so I can start seeing what's taking shape and what I like and what I don't like. Next is the eyebrows. So I'm just placing them. This is all kind of dry fitting it to see what I like before I secure anything with glue. Because once you glue it, it's hard to undo it. And I've put so much time in this puppet. Next is the pupils. I use this velvet sticky paper for my pupils. And I use this cool technique where you stick them on a pin, and that allows you to move them around if necessary a little bit easier. And then I mark it. There we go. And he's basically done. Now that everything's been dry fitted, it's time to glue all his features down on his face. So I glued his eyebrows and I discovered, you know what? I think his eyebrows need a little bit of a haircut. So I'm trimming his eyebrows right there. And then there's the reveal. There he is. There's Frankie the monster. I love him. He turned out so great. There we go. I love him. I hope you guys really enjoy how he turned out. Next step will be to get his clothes done. Um, and I hope you'll continue on my journey with me. Bye.